Shabbat Shalom, dear community and our dear guests. This week, Torah portion, Parashat Eikev, continues the speech of Moshe, in which he recalls the journey of Israel towards the Promised Land. As we travel from the familiar landscape of Egypt to the land of Israel, we are invited to pause and reflect on a profound theological distinction between life in Egypt and life in Israel. In Egypt, sustenance and survival were dependent on the Nile River, whose predictable floods were the lifeblood of the civilization. They brought fertility to the surrounding lands, and the Egyptians had control over the irrigation systems. In essence, they could manipulate the environment to ensure their survival. They were not reliant on divine intervention for their crops to grow. However, in contrast, the land of Israel does not have such predictable or controllable sources of water. Instead, the land's fertility is dependent upon rain, which cannot be controlled or predicted with the same certainty as the Nile. This unpredictable nature of the land of Israel is not a flaw, but rather a feature that was divinely designed. In the book of Dvarim, in our Parashat, Deuteronomy 11:10-12, the Torah tells us, "For the land which you enter to possess is not as the land of Egypt, from where you came out, where you sowed your seed and watered it with your hand like vegetable garden. But the land which you are crossing over to possess is a land of hills and valleys that drink water from the rain of the sky, a land the Lord your God looks after. The eyes of Lord your God are always upon it, from the beginning of the year till the end of the year." I want to emphasize that this is in no way a critique to modern nation of Egypt or its people, but rather it means to illustrate a theological concept. In this concept, God uses the dependence on rain as a powerful reminder of God's presence and the need of Jewish people to keep the mitzvot. The difference between these theologies are quite profound. In Egypt, the focus was on human control and predictability. Life in Israel requires a constant awareness of our relationship with God. This is more than just an agricultural note. It's a profound spiritual lesson. The unpredictability of rain, symbolic of God's divine providence, underscores our limited understanding of nature. In our modern world, marked by scientific and technological advancement, we often forget this lesson. We believe we have tamed nature, that we have demystified its working. This belief has sometimes led us to interfere with natural systems, often to our own detriment. Climate change is a stark reminder of the consequences of such interference. Today, as we confront the global challenge of climate change, we find ourselves at a crossroad. All of us have grown accustomed to a lifestyle that is out of sync with the planet's limits. We enjoy comforts that contribute to the environmental crisis we now face. This reminds me of the life of children of Israel that they were used to. They were going from the most advanced civilization of their time, from Egypt, into the wilderness, and that was extremely challenging, and it did not make people immediately happy. They had to deal with objective suffering caused by lifestyle changes. Even though they were slaves in Egypt, they still quite frequently expressed the desire to go back. I can only imagine how tough life was in the wilderness, that people would prefer even slavery. But still they had to go through these challenges to reach the Promised Land, because there was no future for them in Egypt. Similarly, in response to our modern day crisis, making lifestyle changes is not just an option, but a necessity. These changes, if they are to be meaningful, will not be minor or easy. It is not enough just to recycle and consume mindfully. The changes have to be dramatic. and they will inevitably take away the comfort that we're used to. Here are some examples. Transportation. Reliance on our private cars would mean shifting towards a public transportation, walking and biking. This change would challenge the convenience and speed we're accustomed to. Diet. Significant reduction in meat and dairy consumption, moving towards plant-based food, may disrupt our traditional eating habits and culinary traditions. Imagine, no more Pesach brisket, everyone. Traveling, reconsidering how frequently we fly, especially for leisure, would mean finding new ways to rest, maybe somewhere closer to home. And this would disrupt the global travel culture and our ability to see distant places. Energy use, lowering our energy consumption could mean living with less heating and less cooling and accepting less perfectly temperature-controlled environments. And this could also involve cutting back on our electronic usage, challenging our current norms of constant connectivity using our mobile devices. Another thing is home sizes. Downscaling our living space would challenge the common perception of success and comfort associated with large homes. Smaller homes require less energy to heat and cool, fewer resources to build and maintain, and encourage us to live with less stuff. Importing foods from distant places allows us to enjoy a diverse range of fruits, vegetables, and other products, which are not correlated really to the seasons in the land that we live in. And opting for local grown seasonal food would mean a narrower diet in certain times of the year, challenging our current norms of global food accessibility. Of course, food packaging and waste. Many of us are accustomed to the convenience of prepackaged foods and the variety of produce available year-round, regardless of season. However, this convenience often comes with the cost of extensive plastic packaging and food waste. This means that we would need to live in less comfortable conditions, have smaller houses, eat different and less diverse food, not travel to exotic countries for vacation, and not even use our cars to go wherever we want. Very few people are ready for these changes. In fact, nobody is ready. A lot of these lifestyle choices are rooted so deeply in our culture that we don't even notice the problems they cause. And challenging these cultural norms, even on a small scale, can be very frustrating. I will give you my personal example. As many of you know, I have a pretty decent backyard, right, behind the fence. And it's great, it should be great for parties and BBQs, yet I am very hesitant to invite people there. And that is because my backyard looks so weird to many people, if not right away appalling. I keep a wild garden, and it took me quite some effort to convince Danny, hope he's not here, our operations supervisor, not to cut grass and shrubs there. This shift towards a wild or native garden represents a significant departure from the traditional manicured aesthetics that has dominated landscape design in our culture. I keep all wildflowers that grew there for pollinators, for bees, for bumblebees, for butterflies and other bugs, that they have something to eat. I did not cut the grass so that all kinds of life can flourish there. It also helps me to save the water, because the natural amount of grass compared to man-made lawns keeps the soil from drying up and doesn't require artificial watering. And the garden that prioritizes the health of pollinators and local ecosystem does not align with conventional notions of beauty and order. And embracing this approach requires us to redefine what we consider an attractive and successful garden. In a wild garden, plants are chosen for their ecological function rather than their decorative appeal. This approach often results in a mix of plants that might not be conventionally beautiful or balanced in terms of size, shape, or color. Some plants might appear weedy and untamed, and native plants might not have those flashy blooms that many exotic ornamental species offer. Moreover, a wild garden will teem with life, and not all of it is conventionally appealing. Yes, you might see flutter of butterflies and the busyness of bees, but you will also encounter all sorts of other bugs and beetles and spiders and worms and more. And this multitude of insects might be off-putting to those accustomed to more controlled environments, but they play a critical role in the ecosystem. They are helping to decompose the grass and other biological matters. They help with pest control, and they serve as a food source for birds and other wildlife. For me, this choice is intrinsically connected to the ideas from the Torah. I have to accept the wilderness and trust the divine spirit of nature that does not align with the conventional beauty of gardens. So why, if that is my own garden that is behind the fence, it is still difficult to keep it? Because people have certain expectations. They often think that an untamed garden is a sign of laziness or chaos. More than that, though I keep it hidden, I can't do that in the front lawn because there are regulations that prohibit that. Toronto city government requires you to cut turf grass on your lawn when its growth exceeds 20 centimeters. They immediately also suggest to consider replacing some of your turf grass with natural native flowering plants. But how that can be done practically, I have no idea, because if you cut the grass, then you cannot keep the wild plants. Some of the plants that I have in my garden, they're like this height. So I cannot really cut the grass around them. So I don't know. I don't really know what they mean. But one thing that is apparent to me, we cannot keep both. We cannot keep a perfect garden, and we cannot make it habitable for other living creatures. And there are other important challenges. For example, you need to recognize different plants, so you need to have kind of a substantial knowledge of how they look like, and you need to know which plants are beneficial, which are poisonous, which serve as breeding grounds for all kinds of dangerous pests and diseases. There are some of them that are really poisonous and dangerous. There are some of them that interfere with the ecosystem because they were brought from other countries. So in other words, that will take a lot of energy and time, and people will think that your garden is awful and untamed in the end. And this is just one example of challenging one cultural norm. Imagine how hard it's to convince people to sacrifice their lifestyles for something that we can't fully understand and enjoy. Of course, it's much more convenient just to say that the whole climate change is a hoax. Apparently, people prefer slavery to the discomfort of the wilderness. In our Parsha, Egypt represents a mentality of dominating and controlling nature, much like our technological society that has attempted to control and manipulate the environment, often with little regard to long-term consequences. This mentality has led us to current climate crisis, characterized by increasing frequency of extreme weather, wildfires, floods, and of course the loss of biodiversity. Israel, on the other hand, symbolizes a delicate balance and symbiosis with nature, a dependence on factors that are beyond our control. Parashat Eikev teaches us a timely lesson. It urges us to shift from an Egyptian mindset to control and dominate to an Israel mindset of harmony and balance. Our actions and our relationship with the environment have direct consequences, as God reminds us by making the rain a symbol of life and prosperity, contingent on our behavior and observance of God's commandments. I will conclude with one of my all-time favorite teachings from Midrash, Kohelet Rabbah, or Ecclesiastes Rabbi, which is a sort of a commentary and expansion of the book of Kohelet. Chapter 7, verse 13, when the Holy One created the human being, he took him and led him around all the trees of the Garden of Eden and said to him, behold my works, how beautiful they are. All that I have created is within your domain. Take care, therefore, that you do not destroy my world, for if you do, there will be no one else to set it right after you. Our tradition passed down to us through thousands of years invite us to see climate change not just a scientific issue, but as a spiritual one. It calls us to examine our actions, our values, and our relationship with the natural world. Just as Israelites' sustenance depended on their moral and spiritual conduct, our ability to mitigate climate change and preserve our planet hinges on our commitment to sustainable and ethical practices. And I wish all of us, and I mean really all of us, because it's not easy for anyone. I'm not here to say, that I'm doing a perfect job and everyone else is not doing anything. It's just as hard for me as for anyone else. But I wish us all wisdom and strength that is needed to save the world that the Holy One created for us. And I'm wishing you all Shabbat Shalom.